Hi, I'm Sarah Baldwin, and welcome to another Sunday with Sarah, my weekly video series on which I discuss topics such as Waldorf education, homeschooling, childhood, parenting, the importance of play, and child development. And it is April, and that means that Screen-Free Week is coming up. Now, if you're not familiar, Screen-Free Week is a week in April. This year, it is April 29th to May 5th. So it begins the very end of May. And this is a week that is a program of the Campaign for a Commercial-Free Childhood, nonprofit organization, which for more than 20 years now has been sponsoring what was first called TV-Turnoff Week and now is called Screen-Free Week to include other electronic media such as computers, cell phones, video games, etc. So it's a week in which families are encouraged to try turning off all electronic media for a week with the hopes of reconnecting with families, spending time outdoors, etc. So this week I wanted to share with you a personal story, my family's experience participating in TV-Turnoff Week almost 20 years ago, and what a life-changing event that was for us. I've written about this topic before on my blog, but I thought I would take this opportunity just to talk to you personally about it. So nearly 20 years ago, my son Harper was about 4 years old, and so I guess I was a little less. He's 21 now. You do the math, not quite 20 years ago, a while back. And we lived in Los Angeles, in Hollywood in fact. My husband was an executive editor of Variety, the entertainment trade paper. We lived in the entertainment capital. All our friends were in media, not all, a lot, worked in television and film. I had been an actress. It was our world, and I was a new mother and never really considered, didn't know much at that point about the effects of media and TV viewing for young children. Didn't really question it much. So Harper, as a toddler, was watching TV, but only educational shows. We watched PBS and Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street and carefully chosen videos and child-friendly videos like Disney movies. But as he got a little bit older, and when he was about 4 years old, that's when I first encountered Waldorf education and started reading as much as I could and visiting the local Waldorf school. This was in Pasadena, California, my first introduction to Waldorf education. And I learned that Waldorf teachers frowned on television and media for young children. That was a novel concept to me, but I started reading books and reading about the research and all the effects of passive TV viewing on a young child's developing mind, and really began to start questioning things. And I remember one day as we were driving to visit the Pasadena Waldorf School, I was bringing my husband Max for the first time, and I remember him, we're driving, and he was very skeptical and commented, well, I just don't see how anything, limitation, anything moderation is okay. I don't get this no TV business. Well, we went on the tour, visited the school, listened to a series of talks, saw these children playing. Now, I had been teaching in a mainstream preschool at the time. I noticed something really different in the quality of these children's play at the Waldorf school. They were really playing much more out of their own imaginations, and girls and boys were playing together. They were making up scenes from fairy tales and transforming from one thing to the next. And I contrasted this to the preschool I had been teaching at, where almost all of the play on the playground, the free play, was based on what they'd seen on TV or movies. They were playing Star Wars, or the girls were playing Wizard of Oz. So here are the children at the Waldorf school really inventing things out of their own imaginations. It really began to wake me up. And then I remember that day as we drove home from our visit to the Waldorf school, my husband saying, well, I don't see how turning off the TV could possibly hurt. A shift in his thinking as well. So it wasn't right away that we turned off our TV. It seemed like a daunting task because, like a lot of moms, I didn't have a lot of family around. I was home all day with a 4-year-old and a new baby, and I just couldn't imagine how I was going to get anything done without the electronic babysitter. How would I cook? How would I take a shower? How would I get any house cleaning done? But perhaps the next year, the next spring, TV-Turnoff week came around, and I thought, I'm going to give it a try. And so at the beginning of that TV-Turnoff week, I shut the doors to the TV cupboard and hid the remote. And I have to confess, for the first couple of days, it was really hard, and I didn't know if I would make it through the week. Harper was very demanding and whiny, and all of a sudden he wanted a lot of attention, a lot of my attention. But I was determined to try to make it through the week. And then at the beginning of the week too, I bought a lot of art supplies. I bought big stacks of nice paper and beeswax crayons and markers. And so after 3 or 4 days, I noticed something really remarkable. The whining stopped, and Harper began to just sit and draw for a long time, drawing after drawing. And over the course of the week, I noticed his drawings transform from very immature scribbles to suddenly he was drawing pirate ships and representational things and dragons and knights and castles. It was really amazing. And so over the course of the week, I just saw the value in boredom, and how that is can be a gateway to creativity. When a child says, I'm bored, that can be a great thing because it forces them to find creative ways to occupy themselves. And by the end of the week, our experiment was over, and having witnessed this transformation, and having seen that it's like after a week he'd forgotten about TV and videos, and wasn't even asking for them. And so that was the beginning of, we did not turn it back on for most of their childhoods. Now I'll confess, we never got rid of our TV as much as I would have liked to, as much as I would have loved to have just tossed it out. But my husband was a writer, a journalist, and wrote about media, and he couldn't very well not write about it and not have one. So, but we kept it away, and the children didn't watch it until they were older. And one of the best decisions I think I ever made as a parent. And years later, okay, in the early years, there was it would come up, and my kids would ask why they weren't allowed to watch TV like their friends. But we kept it off, and years later, when Harper started college, he had a lot of roommates who were just addicted to video games, and he would try to play with them, and he was so slow because he hadn't had the years of practice they had, but he really saw it for what it was and realized how much of his childhood he spent building things in outdoors. We were living in the country in Maine, and he thanked me. He thanked me for the fact that, for keeping that away from them as children. And now my younger son, William, is about to head off to college next year, and I thought it was interesting, both Harper and William on their college applications wrote about their experience in Waldorf school, and Harper once commented to me that when he entered film school and took a screenwriting class, he was really surprised that most of his classmates couldn't compose a story. But because he had grown up in a Waldorf school, and being fed a diet of stories, steady diet of stories for all his childhood years, he knew that every story had to have a beginning, a middle, and end, and had to have conflict that needed to be overcome, and thanked his Waldorf education for that. And now my son William, his big interest is computer science. And he wrote on his college application how he didn't use a computer at all in school, didn't start dabbling with computers till he was about 10. And I believe we as Waldorf educators believe that children who are allowed to play freely and creatively, who don't have a lot of media, who don't have a lot of images fed to them, who are allowed to play creatively and with their free imagination, these are the kids who are going to grow up to be the creative thinkers later in life. They are going to be the creators of movies and television programs, perhaps. They're going to be the creators of computer systems we can't even imagine yet. And anyway, that's my story. Sorry it's a little long-winded. But if there is media in your house, I really encourage you to try it for a week. When Screen Free Week comes up at the end of this month, give it a try and see what happens for your family and with your children, and report back to me and let me know. And leave your comments here as always. Maybe you've already pulled the plug. Maybe you've never had a TV in your house. Good for you. Maybe you're not convinced of the benefits yet. Maybe you're like my husband Max, who felt that things in moderation are fine. So below the post on this blog, I will post some resources to Screen Free Week's website and to some other resources that will educate you about some of the research that's been done about the effect of media and a child's developing brain. So as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for the lovely comments that keep coming to me that really give me inspiration to keep going with this video series. Hope you're having a lovely, lovely spring, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.